So I have super exciting news. My Coleus seeds sprouted sometime in the last like 3 hours because they weren't sprouted earlier when I checked on them. I just went to check and they have tiny little sprouts. So that's my exciting news for the day.
So what sprouted, ma'am?
There's Coleus. They're like they're the plants that everybody grows for the leaf.
Coleus. Okay.
Yeah, they don't flower, but
right.
Anyway,
But
I got earlier today and there was nothing, and then all of a sudden now there's something. So
it's amazing. It's amazing what 70 degrees will do.
Yes. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes, living down in the basement right now. So this is round 2 of seedlings.
Cool.
Mayor, did you bring enough dinner for the rest of us?
My wife, who has been on a long diet, agreed to cook dinner for me, but she had to go pick up my daughter from track practice. So I'm eating popcorn to get myself through.
Yeah.
I had popcorn too.
Right.
It's the food of the hour.
I live pretty close to both of you guys. My husband made some pretty killer pork chops I can run by.
You shouldn't offer those kind of things.
Yeah.
Come on, Rocky. I had peanut butter and jelly if we're taking roll on who.
Well, I had homemade lasagna.
Mm.
Ain't no wonder I'm fat, right?
Of course you did.
Go chicken go.
I ate that at least twice a week for about 35 years.
You can't go wrong with Go Chicken Go.
Sure can't.
Yeah, I zoomed through Lion's Choice. It's a roast beef sandwich.
Okay, let's see. Who are we missing? Everybody? Chris. I don't know. Chris, are you back yet?
I am here.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Bynum, I heard you say you had a peanut butter sandwich, so you must be back also.
I'm here.
Okay, great. So thanks so much, everybody, for getting back in a timely manner. And Kathleen, are you going to share your screen? Is that where you planning on doing that? Okay. So Kathleen's going to give us the update on the finances, and then we'll have a conversation about that.
Thank you very much. So I want to start off before I start showing the PowerPoint and thank all of you for the hard work you did last year in passing that budget during a very difficult financial time with COVID. You know, you rose to the challenge, and all of the departments did as well. We're just so pleased by the response we got from the departments. They made cuts to their budgets, and you know, it just worked out terrific. You know, luckily my sales tax estimates were wrong. I don't know if none of us really knew what was going to happen, but they came in much better than I anticipated, and so that really helped our financial picture, which is the subject today for the next 15 minutes. So Monday night, when you get the packet for next Thursday, in it you'll find the fourth quarter budget to actual update for the fourth quarter of 2020. And in there, you're going to have in more detail an explanation of what occurred over the entire course of the year with our revenues and with our expenditures, not only for our 3 general funds, but all of the other 25 or so other funds that we manage as part of the unified government. So look for that in your packet and take a close look at it. And then, as you know, we have a public budget hearing scheduled for March. Oh yes, March 11th. We have the first budget hearing, and so next Thursday, and then the first budget workshop where I'm going to discuss the revenue estimates for 2020 takes place on May 6th. So look forward to that. So now we're gonna head into the slides that I prepared. So I've been asked to talk with you a little bit for about 15 minutes, and I'm going to stick to it, about the budget strategic session. And what I've done is basically look at the entire, the entire financial picture from an operating and then an expenditure side. So the first slide I've got here, and I'll have to move this somewhere. Not sure where I can move. Can I move this down? Okay, yeah. All right, so the general fund 2022 operations, this is a preliminary estimate of how I think we're going to end the general fund, or entering into the 2020 year, which starts on January 1st, 2022. And as you know, the general fund has 3 funds, city, county, and parks, and they're listed here. The city's in blue, the county's in orange, and parks is in gray. I should have made parks in green, so sorry about that. And so as you can see, the general fund is much larger, and what we're anticipating, given the current economic climate, is that revenues are going to resume to the pre-COVID economic activity level. And so with that, given that estimate, we're anticipating to collect in the city general fund $229 million. On the expenditure side, we're assuming that the current status quo will continue with no service delivery changes and only a very modest inflationary increase in various categories, including personnel. And the reason we do a kind of a moderate kind of status quo is just to gauge where we sit. So that the total of those 3 funds totals $236 million. So, we always attempt to have a balanced budget where the revenues and expenditures match each other. Sometimes we have to use resources from our reserves to get there. This estimate, as I'm showing you right now, shows that there is a gap between the operating revenues and the operating expenditures of about $6 million. And this, of course, is before any departmental submissions or any requests from departments. The whole department budget kickoff starts another 2 weeks from now, and the departments will be submitting their requests over the course of the next 6 weeks. So of course, there's always more needs than there are resources. So I expect, given the department request, this $6 million number may increase. And so we'll have to make some tough decisions about how to balance this budget. So now, for simplicity's sake, I didn't go into all the other funds we have, because those are special revenue funds, and we do our best to bring all of those expenditures within the revenue limits that we have. So now on the capital infrastructure needs, we've had several meetings on this. Public Works has provided you with a lot of information on the capital needs of this organization. And given that information, they have included in their request the additional resource needs that they need as part of all the many data-driven assessments that they've conducted over the past few years. So as a result, the status quo right now spends roughly $33 million a year on capital, and this does not include sewer or storm or the enterprise funds. It's pretty much just the city and the county and the dedicated sales tax. So this is the breakout of how much we spend in these areas. Right now, roughly $11 million for streets. We spent about $1 million on bridges, $400,000 a year on parks, about $12 million on facilities, and about $7 million on equipment. And yet over here, this is what the needs are based on the data-driven assessments that have been conducted recently. So as we mentioned, the pavement condition index, or the PCI, has decreased over the past 2 years to 53, which signals that there needs to be further, that we're experiencing further street deterioration. A recent bridge assessment estimated that there's a need for 14 million per year in order to keep up with the maintenance of our many bridges. Several years ago, there was a park enhancement. There was a park master plan that that identified what kind of funding would be required to maintain all our parks, and certainly enhancing our parks would enhance resident quality of life. And then lastly, there are deferred maintenance needs in our UG facilities that need further analysis. So given that $45 million annual unfunded capital needs gap, we think that it's a daunting number. And so we probably need to step back and take a look at our current inventory and see how much of it do we actually proceed with. Should we be doing facilities and space assessment and to determine, especially with all the remote working, whether there is a need for all the buildings that we're currently maintaining. The same with streets. Are there streets out there that we can decommission and let go? Are there various bridges that are underutilized and could be closed? And do our many parks and parklands serve the best best serve the needs of our residents, or is there some consolidation that would be more appropriate? Those are lots of tough questions, and but things that we hope to explore in the coming budget season. One other thing that I very much am always talking about is priority-based budgeting, and this is an initiative that a couple of commissioners asked for over 5 or 6 years ago, and we have been working little by little on getting that up and running, and we've made lots of progress in the past few months. So just as a reminder, last January, we did an overview of the priority-based budgeting with you, and from that meeting, we concluded that we were to achieve an objective by 2024 to identify $15 million in our current budget that we can reallocate either to new programs or to reallocate for other activities, for instance, street maintenance. So in order to identify those 15 million, we concluded that we could free up $1 million by examining how we source our current services, $2.5 million through different efficiencies, 10 million in service level reductions or changes, and then 1.5 million in additional fee or other revenues. And so those are some targets that we are keeping in mind and doing our best to achieve. And so we've done a lot of, already started with a lot of projects that are going to achieve those efficiencies over the past year. But in addition to that, over the past 6 weeks or so, we have conducted 3 different workshops with our staff across all the departments. Over 120 people attended these workshops, and from those workshops, they're called PBB Insight workshops. And what we've done is we have identified a whole slew of insights from the many people that worked collaboratively in groups to identify areas where we can either be more efficient or can look into other ideas for revenue enhancement. So it's all culminating next Wednesday when each group will be within the workshop, group of 120 people. We'll be presenting each group's ideas to Doug, and we'll be making note of them and doing an inventory of all the possible things we could do to help. So definitely PBB is going to be part of the conversation as we enter into this year's budget season. So the other thing is we're doing a multi-year phased approach to our fee revenue adjustments in order to diminish the impact to residents and mindful of the economic downturn and hardship that our residents have faced during the COVID. So generally speaking, PBB, that objective is to find at least 15 million. We've given ourselves 3 years to find that 15 million, and we're working towards that goal. And hopefully we'll get there sooner. So that's all I have for my brief presentation. And, if you have any questions, I'll be here to answer them.
Do we have any questions of the information that Kathleen's presented so far? Or just follow-up discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question on the some of those services free up. What are we talking about there? And is that something obviously we'll look at in more detail, but just some sense, 3.3% improvement in that area?
Are you talking about what kind of revenue or expenditure increases I put in place for 2022?
The previous slide. Bring the previous slide back.
Talking about the PBB and what kind of ideas you've come up with on that.
Right. So, all right. So 5% of the total governmental expenditures are roughly $300 million across, includes all governmental expenditures, everything that's not enterprise. And so 5% of that is about $15 million. And so among all that 300 million, we're trying to find, 15 million. And of the 15 million, 10 of it we hope to find through various efficiencies or service level reductions. So that would be at service level, meaning we would reallocate those monies to other areas of higher priority based on your direction and based on the strategic goals. Now, I can't tell you exactly what those are going to be because that's kind of part of the process, but we've scored all of the services of the unified government. There's over 400 of them. And we know what programs scored higher than which ones scored lower. And so we're probably going to be, focusing on those lower priority programs. So.
Okay, but these specific budget cuts or fee reductions or service reductions have not been identified. Just the priorities have, and that based upon practice elsewhere, you would assume, or in other places it has generated that level? Yes.
So there are over 200 cities across the country have done priority-based budgeting, and a good 20 to 30% of them have identified at least 10% of expenditure reductions. We're only going for 5 right now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions?
Commissioner Bynum, can you put your slides back up?
You bet. Oh, shoot. No, cancel. I almost left the meeting.
And I think the first slide is the one where you show the projected revenue and expenditure for 2022.
Thank you. Sorry. What's going on? Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it. It's smaller. And the
okay there.
Thank you. That's the one. On this slide, I know that we're talking about revenue and assumes resumption of pre-COVID activity. So on the expenditure side, is the assumption that everything that's currently funded is funded?
Yes, yes,
And so the increases would represent things like increased costs, raises, healthcare. Is that
yes,
accurate?
exactly. So we have included a modest percentage increase for all UG employees in the 2022 budget. So just as a reminder, we haven't provided any salary increase in 2021 except for sheriff and the police department. So, and maybe a few other small unions. So, yeah. So the 2022 budget has a modest increase for personnel. It also has, you know, some inflationary increases to services and utilities. It includes a good bump in the cash funded capital projects and equipment. And that's because a lot of capital and equipment was postponed from 21 to 2022 because we were trying to save money with COVID. And we believe some of that shift will shift back as we amend the 2021 budget. So
I mean, I appreciate your explanation. It's important for us to understand the baseline.
yeah,
Starting point that you started with and what you've included in it.
that's right. So just a status quo figure. That's what it is.
Okay.
Kathleen, Commissioner Ramirez, okay, it says our estimated budget gap is 6 million. Now, and maybe you may not be able to answer this because it's a hypothetical. If, let's say, our estimates weren't coming in as they were, what would that gap look like?
Well, so 2020, at least sales tax, you know, it came in the same flat with 2019. And typically sales tax increases at least 2%. So we experienced a loss there, and we expect sales tax in 21 to be slower than normal. But in 2022, my thought is that it will jump back up to around the 3 to 4% level, but still off the lower base. The revenue estimate, in other words, the revenue estimate I have in here for this revenue column is pretty conservative. And of course, you want your CFO to be conservative. So of course, we all hope for the best. Now, if revenues don't come in according to this number, and let's say if that's your question, if let's say the number comes in at $220 million, then that loss of $9 million would come from our fund balance. So it's like your checking account. You have a certain amount in your checking account, and you think you're gonna, work and get a $2,000 paycheck at the end of the week, but then so you pay a bunch of bills, but then the paycheck only comes in at say $1,800, so that difference comes right out of your checking account balance. And that's basically the fund balance. That's what we talk about with fund balance or reserve.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, because I'm trying to show for if those who are watching, yes, we have a $6 million gap, but it could have been worse, but we're doing good. And so I'm trying to reiterate that to the people who are watching, like, yes, that's a big number, but it could have been bigger with what we went through last year. So I want to thank you for your department and all of the other departments who worked hard, and us as a governing body to make those hard decisions last year to revert money, cut some down. But so thank you for all that you guys do. And we have a light down the tunnel. It may take a minute to get there, but we're getting there.
Right.
This is Commissioner Johnson. Kristen, were you talking about on a historical basis or on a projected basis? I just want to make sure I was that you were clear, getting the answer that you wanted.
Yeah, projected basis.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would refer you to the November long-range financial forecast that I presented in November or October. And that document, it's a 100-page document that really talks about the projection, what our past and future fund balances are for all our funds. And I can send you the link to that and you can take a look at it. So, because it's
I just want to say this, Kathleen, I think this is the right path. I see where you're going with this. I think this is something that our taxpayers have been asking for a long time. I think this is something that we as commissioners, as persons that have been running for office have kind of dabbled around, but never really knew how to go about finding redundancies and areas where there could be some efficiencies. And so I think that the direction that you're going is the right one. I think I will say to my colleagues, including myself, that we need to stay open-minded, that we just need to stay open-minded as to what this might reveal. I mean, the data and the data will reveal to us, I think, the areas where we can make some improvements. And those are I've been talking about big boy, big girl decisions. I think that the outcomes of your process, of your evaluation and your analysis will lead us to those really tough decisions that will ultimately, I think, set us in the right trajectory for years going forward. So I just want to let you know that I see where you're going.
Okay, does anyone have any other thoughts or questions? Doug, did you want to wrap it up with something, or?
No, I was just saying, I don't see any other questions. Well,
Okay.
Commissioner Burrows just put his hand up.
Okay, yeah. Commissioner Burrows, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Doug. I want to follow up with Commissioner Johnson's comment. Do we know, we've looked at this budget process now for a year where we are. Kathleen, do we have a number of dollars and what we've been able to do now in the short amount of time we've worked on it? I mean, we've had almost a year. I'm just kind of curious where we are with those numbers to kind of keep us on track.
Well, the goal is to achieve 15 million over the next 3 years. We have our wrap-up workshop with our county administrator and 120 staff members next Wednesday, where all of that will be laid out and presented. We have some preliminary estimates of all the insights that will be presented, but none of it is finalized. And the priority-based budgeting process would have continued. It lost some momentum because we got hit with COVID last year and we had a lot more things to do. And so we had to set it aside for a little bit, but we're bringing it back and it has a lot of momentum now. So I did want to mention that even though it did take an initial investment with the acquisition of our human capital or human resources and finance enterprise resource planning software system, the projection from our business case analysis shows that once it's implemented, we'll save $5 million a year in administrative costs. And so that's definitely going to go a long way towards achieving this $15 million target. So that's one of the many efficiencies that we're putting in place, and we're actively working to implement that software and go live by the middle of next year. So.
Well, thank you for that. And I do know that this pandemic has really put a challenge on everyone. This is something that this priority-based budgeting is something I think is very beneficial. And we do know the cultural change it will cause within across the entire unified government. I was just kind of curious, even in the most trying of times where we've been able to identify where we can see some budget shifts. So I'll just wait, and I appreciate your response, Kathleen. Thank you.
Yeah. So as Commissioner Johnson said, what we look from you all is to for you to have faith and to trust the process. It's going to be a data-driven process, and so sometimes it's hard to re-examine programs, but a lot of the conversation will also be about how to provide the same programs more efficiently and for less cost too. So it's not just cutting programs, it's also re-evaluating how we provide programs and refocusing some of the objectives. So it's a combination of the two. And it's gonna take a lot of work for the departments to implement some of these programs or some of these insights. So yeah, it's a big ship. We have to steer it.
Great. Any other questions or reflection on what Kathleen presented? Okay. Well, the next thing we're going to do is kind of go into a discussion a little bit more specific about prioritization. And as Kathleen developed her presentation, she shared with us some of the major categories and challenges in terms of infrastructure and some of the operating areas that there's been planning, but maybe additional emphasis might be needed to implement. And then also I took some notes from our conversation earlier. So I'm going to share my screen and kind of show you the next exercise that we're going to do. Let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger without completely taking everybody off the screen here. So some of the areas, there's kind of big buckets of dollars that want to kind of get a sense of where you are and your thoughts on that. Our previous discussion was about reducing blight and improving infrastructure. And so I have topics listed across these sticky notes here. And what I want to do is just kind of walk through each of these, and then we can add categories as well. But thinking about some of the bigger, chunkier areas where investment would be needed, particularly starting with blight reduction. We can kind of start there, which is the goal number 1. And I'm going to kind of organize these by that. So enhancing SOAR, want to kind of think about this in terms of long-term. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of maybe increasing our emphasis in this area for 2022? I'm kind of just go through there, and going to start out with, let's start out with Commissioner Johnson. Some of the advantages and disadvantages. You talked about kind of the tax delinquency program. Advantage there might be to you're going to be increasing your resources by having some emphasis there. Other thoughts on SOAR and kind of the long-term advantages and disadvantages of further emphasis in that program?
The word that we, I'm somewhat of a wordsmith. But the word that kind of came through in some of our other prior discussions was beautification. And we want to beautify our city. And that beautification will do a lot as it relates to the perception. And person's perception drive their decisions. And so as we continue to beautify our city, making sure doing the best we can with the little money that we have, and we have to continue to figure out ways to cobble money to do the basic things in terms of keeping our land bank lots cut, and not only cut, but keeping them trimmed. It's simple stuff, making sure all of our parks are manicured properly. Just the thing, making sure that we're being as aggressive as we possibly can in tearing down properties that are beyond salvageability, and doing the best we can to aggressively to make sure that we're getting those other properties that are salvageable into the hands of developers so that they can flip those houses and put them back on the tax rolls. Those are the things, I mean, those are the things that are at stake. And as we continue, if we don't do this, then we're going to continue to be stuck in this, for lack of a better term, this matrix where we're not making any progress overall. So it is imperative that we continue to move forward with SOAR because the upward trajectory of our community economically is at stake.
Okay, anybody else have anything to share kind of about some of the advantages or potential kind of disadvantages other than it's a costly it's costly, all the programs cost money. Other thoughts about SOAR?
I do think that can be sort of the thought is that, well, we're making things pretty, but there's no financial benefit. But that's not the case. I mean, we've already seen income from those Opportunity Knocks properties. They're going back on the tax roll, so they weren't getting tax dollars off of them. We're getting increased tax income from the tax sales and from our tax collection efforts. And then we know from studies throughout the country that improvements beget improvements. So when we're improving the properties that we have control over, or the properties that developers are taking as part of Opportunity Knocks, they're making changes in the neighborhood. Other people then want to make improvements to their properties, and collectively that's increasing the value of those properties. So I think it's a mistake to look at SOAR as just we're making things pretty, but we don't get any money back, because it does result in income back to us. It might be a longer path to get there, right? It takes a little longer for us to see those impacts than if we just got a check from somebody. But I think it definitely does have a financial impact, and a positive one for us.
We have proof that SOAR works. And it did. It's taken a while to get some of our monies back. But when you see the pictures of the changes that they have made, and then you get the ricochet effect. They fix up their house, the guy next to them fix up their house, the guy next to them fix their house. So it's absolutely something that we need to focus on and can continue. And if we can get bigger and better at it, then that's even another advantage. But this program has been very good. It works, and I would not want to not do it. In fact, I'd like to do more.
Okay, other thoughts? Commissioner Walters, how about you? You've got your camera or your volume up.
Oh, I apologize for that. No, I don't really think I have anything to add, but I do have a question. We seem to be dwelling a lot on light and infrastructure. Are we going to talk about the other priorities also, or is that the limit of this discussion?
No, we can sure talk about other ones. Is there a recommendation?
Well, wasn't economic development kind of an important aspect to most of the commissioners, or a lot of the commissioners?
Right. So, yes, we can talk about economic development.
Well, I don't want to throw you off course.
No, you're totally fine. Yeah, we kind of have some of those listed out here that we'll kind of go through and that sort of thing. But yes, we could get onto that. And Commissioner Philbrook.
I just quickly wanted to agree with everybody else has said, but also in the vein of OPM, other people's money, that we've had people, they come in and they fix their money, to do it, and then we profit by having a nicer neighborhood, others to take care. So this really is an excellent program, because we're not paying to, and then we get taxes back on these properties. So this is an excellent program.
So go ahead, Mayor.
Sorry. Just to echo really what Commissioner Barkley and Commissioner Philbrook and Commissioner Kane, because if we continue to work on blight remediation, that is an economic development project, to Commissioner Walters' thing. And also it will encourage infill development. And so if we can show improvements to neighborhoods, then those lots that we have that we're paying to take care of become more attractive for developers. And we're already starting to see that. So it all works together. And to Commissioner Walters' point, I look at another item up here. I'd like to restore public safety staffing. The 24 police officers we did not hire last year was a great loss, frankly. It was the most diverse class that we've had. And we do need the staffing.
Diane, I want to agree with the mayor on that. I think we missed a golden opportunity. And this ties into what I was talking about earlier is we had a really good diverse group. You know, we just need to take it a step further and hire as many people from Wyandotte County as possible.
Sheila, it's Melissa Bynum. I'm so sorry. Can you reframe all of this for me?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm just kind of taking some of the bigger chunky items in terms of like programs that you have. Some of those are operational programs like public safety staffing and some of the cuts that you put in place last year, and kind of trying to talk through, do you want to put more money into pavement? You want to put more money into hiring those back, or are there other kind of trade-offs? We're kind of trying to think about like, or do you want to send the money for the increase in the assessed valuation, roll that back and have that go to the property owner? So kind of just trying to figure out the trade-offs policy-wise that will help the staff do their budget process, if that makes sense. So there's quite a few things on here. The Parks Master Plan, I've kind of written up the ones you guys talked about in your accomplishments. High performing, maybe it's good for me to just kind of go through some of these first. Pavement condition, trying to improve pavement condition or streets maintenance. Public facilities deferred maintenance, Kathleen just spoke of that. There was discussion earlier about decreasing tax delinquencies. That's kind of part of your SOAR program. Restoring public safety personnel, implementing the Parks Master Plan, investing in high performing recruitment and retention of staff. I've got that one in there twice. Let's see, continuing public health services levels to pre-pandemic levels, enhancing overall service levels in other areas. And then kind of continuing with your financial strategy, returning tax assessed valuation growth to the property owner. So that's kind of rolling your mill levy back with the growth, explore additional funding sources. Another one is the economic development. As you said, one of the things is that kind of your corridor program. That's a kind of a redevelopment program and other economic development activities. So just kind of trying to brainstorm again some of these bigger chunky and get some direction in terms of policies. Then we're going to kind of do some trade-offs again, kind of what we just did, but with real life elements that are one mil buys this type of thing. Fire truck, police safety, that kind of thing.
Okay. You know, back to Kathleen's presentation with the 2022 revenue projection, I have to believe that projection includes the increased valuation. I'm sure it does.
I believe that's right, Kathleen. You're accounting for the assessed valuation going up. She can answer that.
And yet still contains a $6 million budget gap. So.
So the question can be too, are there areas that we kind of tried to go through? Are there areas where we want to make up that gap? Or are there areas that you want to invest additional resources in? Or do you need additional revenue sources? What are your thoughts, Commissioner Bynum? You're kind of going in the direction I'm thinking is, let's kind of talk about the overall way to address this.
I guess we are going to hone in on the, you know, what the priorities really are, because we are starting with a $6 million budget gap.
Mhm.
And so that conversation becomes, which of these do we want to do less of?
Or which you want to do more of and less of the other. Yeah.
I mean,
the trade-off.
I guess I'm not trying to guide us toward that. I'm very willing to be open to other strategic ways to look at this, but I think that's where I'm struggling a little bit, frankly. I mean, for example, to have an option being, you know, return increased valuation to the property owner. And we've started with a slide that says that we have a $6 million gap out of the gate. Seems a little difficult.
Right. So this would be difficult because of the lack of revenue available in the gap.
That's where I'd love to start is, you know, mill levy reductions, but obviously this may not be the time, and I may be way ahead of the game.
Nope, that's the conversation we're trying to have is, well, how do we want to handle this, the gap, and then where do we want to prioritize resources?
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it. I'm
So you're saying that would be difficult to kind of do that this year?
It looks like it right this minute.
Yep. Okay. Mayor Alvey?
I'm just going to, follow up with Commissioner Bynum and again, go back to Commissioner Walters. What we know is working is the blight remediation, right? And that houses are being, rehabbed. We actually have competition for the houses that come into the rehab program. There's actually a little bit of bidding war going on. That's a great sign. I think we're going to start seeing more interest, already starting to see more interest in vacant lots and to bring some development at scale. So it's one of those things where with limited resources, we want to keep that engine going. And how do we keep that economic development of the older part of town going? And the SOAR program is helping with that, and Opportunity Knocks, those kinds of things. And I hate, I know that obviously the condition of our roads, we can't put that off much longer. I'd like to see what are those things we absolutely have to do this year, or they're just going to get even more expensive and take us down. But to really start thinking about what are the things we do in services that we can do that the low-lying fruit that's going to generate the most return on investment. Because I love, bike trails are great. Is that really going to drive investment? And ultimately, I'd love to see more bike trails, but let's not put the money there right now. We've got to take care of the roads. And I'm all for walkability and bikeability, but with limited resources, what's going to generate the return on investment for us?
So maybe go to Commissioner Walters. In terms of economic development, we're talking kind of infill and SOAR in the existing area or the already developed areas. Are there other economic development opportunities that would benefit the community to put more emphasis on in 2022?
Well, one thing that occurs to me is we still have thousands of vacant lots that we own. So I understand it's an infill house on a block that has a vacant lot is good. I would like us to take consider taking a more aggressive approach and do entire blocks or neighborhood redevelopments rather than individual lots. If we do, and it will take us decades to get rid of thousands of vacant lots. So I would like us to at least think about doing something on a little bit grander scale.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's a public-private partnership of some kind with a developer who who would like to get involved in our community in a partnering type of way, and build neighborhoods rather than focus solely on infill houses. There are obviously there's a tremendous redevelopment or new development going on in the western part of the county. We should, continue to do that. But, if there are some things that are holding us back, we should identify those. I happen to live or represent a district that's adjacent to Shawnee. And Shawnee is building thousands of apartments and thousands of individual houses, and we're not. So why not? And I don't think we can sit around here as a board of commissioners and figure that out. We've got to go to the marketplace and have someone tell us why we're not having apartments built in Wyandotte County and why we're not having very many single family homes built. It would be great to get the population of this county up. In my opinion, it's essentially where it was 50 years ago. So those are some of the things that cross my mind.
Gotcha. Great. Okay. Other thoughts on kind of economic development, either redevelopment or new development? One of the other categories was kind of corridor reinvestment. Maybe that spurs some conversation there. And I'm going to go to Commissioner Burrows. I think you had a comment. I go next talk.
And I appreciate Commissioner Walters bringing this forward. This isn't that I couldn't have stated it much better than what he did. That's absolutely the truth in being bold in our development for reinventing our neighborhoods. We now have an aggressive young urban planner that is on our staff now, and I would encourage us to encourage them to look at how we build our communities to enhance some of the things we talked about: walkability, streetscape, opportunity to slow traffic down so that people can have access to transportation, whether it be by bike, car, or bus, or whatever, to enjoy those areas. We've worked hard and spent a tremendous amount of human capital and resources in these master plans. And the only time we really seem to address these master plans is when we have a big development coming in. But when those big developments come in, we don't continue to look at the health aspect of that and the walkability and or the connectivity to other parts of the community that encourages our small business to be prosperous, to encourage those that are in our apartment complexes to have the opportunity to gather in a common area. So I agree 100% with Commissioner Walter that we need to be bold in that. And we have an opportunity that many communities don't. We have a municipal utility that we should be partnering with to make that possible. And I believe that we have a unique opportunity in Wyandotte County with all the diversity and ethnicities we have. There's not a reason why we can't do something in each specific district and give those that want to come in. And I'm going to go back to Commissioner Philbrook and others that talk about building our economy on other people's dollars. If we have a Northeast special area and an Armourdale special area, a Central Avenue special area, we've got the legends. If we put our investments in pockets of our community, people will want to be led to those areas for participation, whether it be home ownership, business opportunities, and or just to be part of the community. And so I agree 100%. And if we were going to offer economic incentives, I believe that if we looked at offering economic incentives to homeowners and or small business owners and or entrepreneurs that wanted to come in and be part of those investments, that would be a great return on investment.
Okay, great. Other thoughts on economic development? Let's get back to what Mayor Brian. Sorry, Commissioner McCurney.
Thank you. One other thing that I think we should at least consider with economic development is we talk about millions of dollars of economic development in our community. Those are dollars that don't come to us in our general funds. They bring amenities, they may bring jobs, they definitely bring benefits. But every new development, and I apologize to those of you who've heard this more than once, every new development puts a stress on our infrastructure, our personnel infrastructure to provide services to that new development, our physical infrastructure around and leading to that development. And I think if there's any way that we can still get development, but increase the amount of money to the general fund that we realize from that development, then we can start chipping away at these things like infrastructure improvement that cost millions of dollars out of our general fund to do. And so I would just encourage us all to think about how we structure our economic incentives and to think about ways in which we can still get the development, still get the amenities, still get the jobs, and yet still realize some income into our general fund that we can then spend right back on the development and the area around it.
Great. So anybody else have anything before I go back to the kind of the question at hand, the $6 million gap? Anything else anybody has to offer? Commissioner
I'll
Johnson?
just add, yeah, I was trying to be quiet. Stop it, Jim. We have to, and this speaks to the mayor's point and the things that Jim has said and others, we have to build up these neighborhoods that are immediately adjacent to downtown. Without those neighborhoods being completely infield, we will not be successful in building up our overall downtown and eastern corridor. We would not be able to take advantage of the opportunities that the rivers bring that we have not yet tapped into. We have economic vehicle called the Kaw Valley or the Kaw River that we are just now starting to think about as an economic engine. And so we need the eastern neighborhoods, particularly the ones that are adjacent to downtown, to be as strong as possible. And that means infrastructure, that means everything that we've talked about. All properties need to be infield. That is the only way that we're going to see a strong downtown and be able to take advantage of the landscape that's already there. So I just want to make sure I add that bit of seasoning in there, and now I'll be quiet.
Well, if I could add, I agree with you, Harold, and I think the advantage of going big is if you could rebuild an entire street of houses, maybe you can replace the sewer in the street while you're at it as part of that project. Whereas if you just build a single house, they're not going to replace the street, they're not going to replace the sewer and all that. And I agree that the whole idea is to increase our economic situation. So I'm not suggesting that we're doing this just for fun.
Totally agree.
Okay, great. So what about this $6 million deficit? In the past, I know you've talked a little. Oh, sorry, I'm making this super big now. I think I've gotten out of control. You've talked in the past about, the kind of the importance of rolling back the tax levy over the past several years. Thoughts about that in terms of, is this the right year for that? Commissioner Walters, then I'll go to Mark Lee.
All right. Well, thanks for calling on me so often. I appreciate it.
I know, well, your camera's on, or your thing's on.
Oh,
so
okay. Well, I guess my first question is I'm kind of inferring from some of the comments made by Kathleen that we have a fairly substantial surplus from 2020 based on having sales tax revenue greatly in excess of anticipation. So, I mean, before we start talking about what we have to cut, I guess I'd like to see the full picture. What did our 2020 look like? Do we have a surplus? If we have a surplus, what are we going to do with that? Do we reduce debt? Do we cut the mill levy? Do we just put it in our reserves? That kind of thing. I think we kind of got to address that before we start figuring out any kind of $6 million gap for 2022.
And the $6 million gap is what Kathleen is supposed to show us. She's the CFO, for Pete's sake. She can't show us, that we're going to have a $6 million surplus, and so, we know that our goal is to beat the gap. I'm not worried about the $6 million gap right now. I know what our priorities are. I think we need to stick with our priorities. I think that at the end of the day, we're going to find the efficiencies. I think the priority-based budgeting is going to help us. I think we just need to let that play out. It will manifest itself as we go through the process. I don't think we need to get ourselves up in an uproar about whether. I think, if there's an opportunity, if there's not an opportunity for us to lower the mill levy, then we just hold tight for right now. We don't have to. I don't think we need to increase it. But I don't think we have all of the story yet. Jim brought up the point. I mean, we don't have the whole story yet to start trying to jump ahead of the wagon there. So,
and I agree with both of them. $6 million is a lot, but it's too early to even think about what we're going to do. This is our first budget talk, and we will make adjustments to fill that gap. But in our first budget meeting, I don't want to say it's ridiculous to look at it, but I don't look at my budget at home knowing I'm a little short right now. I'm going to try to plan to fill that gap. And right now, there's a gap. So give us a little bit of time to think about that gap and see the adjustments that we will make for that gap.
Yeah, I agree with.
And I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead. No, go right ahead.
Hand up, and she's in the attendees group, and I don't know if that means she needs to get promoted back over or what.
Oh, is that Angela you said? I missed that.
Kathleen.
Oh, Kathleen. Yeah. Kathleen, do you want to speak? And then we'll go back to the mayor. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. I just wanted to answer that question. So at the as the report that you're going to be getting as part of the commission packet on Monday says, the fourth quarter report shows that the general fund used 1.7 million in reserves at the end of 2020. And so we ended the year with a total reserve balance that on a percentage basis is pretty much, a little smaller, but pretty much level with what we came into the year with, except for about $1.7 million. So we're still at the 20% of total expenditures and transfers reserve percentage, which is greater than our 2-month minimum target reserve. The 2-month minimum target reserve is 16 or 17%, and we're at 20%. So as you know, this past year, it was a good thing we had that reserve because you never know what's going to happen with pandemics or floods, what have you. So it's good to know that we have some money set aside for emergencies. But yeah, so we did eat into our reserves a little bit by $1.7 million last year, revenues minus expenditures.
Doug?
The question I have to Kathleen, so when we get these budget documents or the information next Monday, will this be sufficient for us to be able to make the kinds of determinations about where we might go with these things? Because I know what we're trying to do is we're trying to give direction to the county administrator and to the budget team to go out to all the programs and the agencies and say, this is what you got to work with. This is what the commission has, the direction the commission has given. So those hard choices, we don't want to come to the end of the budget process and the last week say, after we've done all that work, say, oh, well, guess what? Now we're going to do a 1 mil decrease, or we're going to do a 1 mil, whatever it might be. We need to give the direction now so that their budget efforts are well placed.
Yeah. Yeah. So if let me put it this way, the $6 million gap, if you do a 1 mil decrease, that $6 million gap will be a $7.2 million gap. So.
Well, I understand that. Well, we understand that. The question I have is, we've been asked to prioritize what we would do, where we would cut if we've got a $6 million deficit. But you're saying that there was, in fact, we did not have a surplus from last year. We were still down 1.7 million. And that where we're going to be for 2022 is still down in revenues. So there are cuts, and we're being asked to decide where those cuts need to be.
Yes, that's right. We're asking for some direction on what would be palatable, or items that, well, basically we're asking for where are your highest priorities, so that we know that those are the ones we want to protect and preserve and nourish.
To Commissioner Kane's point and to others, when we get this new information on Monday, that's when we can really give the direction, because it seems like we're talking a little bit of generalities right now.
When will, Kathleen, when will we get the outcome from the priority-based budgeting discussion with the different departments?
Let's see here. So we have scheduled in the beginning of May a presentation from our consultant and my budget team on the results of the priority-based budgeting process. And I can tell you exactly what date if you give me 2 seconds. So,
well, while you're looking that up, for me personally, I want that information before I make any decisions. And maybe timeline wise, that's not feasible. But I sure would like to know how that report came out before I'd give any direction. That's just my own opinion.
Well, with Doug's permission, I mean, I would make the suggestion that we could provide information ahead of the times for you to have plenty of time to review and look at it. And then the presentation that we are going to have with you would be more meaningful and meaty, because you'd have the information to really discuss in more detail.
Yeah, the sooner we get that, the more I think I'd be equipped to lend that information.
I agree with you, Harold, and I'm jumping in because I had my hand up for a while, but I don't think we're paying any attention to the hands right now.
So that PBB meeting is May 20th, but we can get that beforehand. Absolutely.
Well, Harold, I agree with you. We need that information to know what the people that are running and doing all the work in the city see where we can hone things. And so we need that information, the nuts and bolts, to make the decision on, well, to make it as part of the decision on where we're going to be going with that. Because if we can save several million there, we can reroute some of that to some of the other. So, until we know that, I don't think we have enough information to make that an informed. And I'll tell you right now, off the top of my head, I don't want to change the mill levy either way. Sorry, I'll just tell you that right now.
Come on in, Tom. Nobody else is waiting until they get acknowledged.
I can't see anyone's hands up, so I'm not sure what, are you guys putting them up with the your actual hand, or you're putting up your little thing? I can't see it, but go ahead, Commissioner Barros.
Just trying to be respectful. The opportunity here to make a decision this evening goes right back to what was the questions that were asked earlier. What are those potential savings that we've had through the PBB aspect? And I'm really pleased to see the commission, we as commissioners are looking at the data versus just taking an attempt to direct staff on how to budget when we don't have accurate numbers. And it's been very gratifying this evening to hear the commitment that each and every one of us have in moving our community forward. And you know, I will state this, you all more senior than me on the commission. You've served here for a while, so I can only imagine how excited you are in reference to the projects that are moving forward and seeing some movement, some accomplishment. That I will state, in the 3 years I've been here, there's never been one budget that we've ever had a dime to spend anything. It's always been that we don't have any money, and here we are 3 months out and we're $6 million in the hole. And and every year the budget comes forward and we're putting money in reserves. And so I don't know how to phrase this, but I would really like to see more accurate data like some of you have asked this evening, so that we can help guide staff in the direction we need to move. But it is very difficult for me as a commissioner and as a resident of Wyandotte County, knowing how much my evaluation has shot up and knowing how much my taxes have gone up, that we still don't have a dime in the budget to address some of the concerns that we've had this evening. And so I really do sincerely respect the request to have the PBB results in. I would like to know the amount of money that's coming forward due to valuation. And I would hope that valuation is not going to increase to cover that shortfall by a matter of having to cover that shortfall. I hope that we're being fair and equitable across the community in reference to valuations, because that can really have a negative impact on how our residents feel about how we are going about our budgeting process. So I would just like to say, I would like that data. I think we deserve to be able to be prudent in how we make our decisions moving forward.
Thanks. I think we have Commissioner Ramirez.
Wait, do I ever get to go?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't see your hands up because I've shared my screen. So I'll let you go first. Ladies first.
I was after Commissioner Walters about 10 people ago, but
go ahead.
then we kind of went off other directions.
Yeah.
So one of the squares that you had up on that chart was about deferred maintenance, but about deferred maintenance of our own facilities. And everybody on here has heard me say it before. I think we need to look at whether we need the same number of facilities. I think this COVID year has proven that we can perform a lot of our operations without as many facilities. And I know, I come here on the commission from a time when I was told we couldn't register vacant properties and make them pay money, which we now do, and that we couldn't take properties with houses into the land bank, which we now do. So I know it sounds like a super crazy idea to say the government doesn't need a bunch of buildings, because cities have traditionally always had all these government facilities, but I think it's something that we can do that would have minimal impact on our taxpayers. They get the same services, they just get them virtually. And it could be a huge savings for us, and not just a short-term savings, but a long-term savings. And if we sell off some of those buildings, we get immediate income on top of the long-term savings. So I really think it's critical that we look at it. I think we need to, if we're not already having those conversations in the background, we need to start having them, because if we want to make an impact in the upcoming budget, we've got to start deciding what our facility situation might look like and what we would do with those facilities we're no longer using. But I think it's an opportunity missed if we don't look at it. Obviously, there'll be some people that will say, well, I wanted to go to that building right down the street from me, and now if I actually want to go to a building, I have to go downtown or I have to do it virtually. Is that an inconvenience? Yes, but is that inconvenience for some residents? How does that weigh against the huge cost savings? And to me, there's just no competition. So I hope we're looking at that, and I think it's a way for that long-term savings that we're looking for, and just to be more efficient. So you've heard it before, I just had to say it again.
So what I'm hearing is one kind of takeaway from this is the idea of trying to reduce your deferred maintenance costs, either through that preventative maintenance of your streets so that you don't get your pavement index low, and also looking at the number of facilities you have and how you can reduce. So that can be kind of a takeaway in terms of budget direction. Would that be, do we have agreement on that? Maybe raise your physical hand, because I cannot see your, the ones that you were raising. Yeah, there you go. So that sounds like kind of a good direction. And then let's go with Commissioner Ramirez.
Sorry, could not unmute myself.
That's okay.
I'm gonna fall with my fellow colleagues who believe is making decisions like this without the fuller picture. It's hard for us. You know, we may not be able to get the full picture, but let us get as close as we can before we start making decisions, big decisions like this. You know, these are taxpayer money, and we can't. You know, a lot of this is what we think or what we hope will be. Hope doesn't pay bills. Hope doesn't give money. We need to do this with some percentage of certainty so that we know we're making a good decision and best decision for our community. So I think it's just we need that PBB data so that we can have this conversation again and have a real thorough conversation about what needs to change and what efficiencies we can find.
So the other kind of comment then is just to look for efficiencies through PBB to reduce costs and align in a higher level of priorities, which tonight you really did set in terms of some of the weighting for the PBB, a little higher goals in 2 areas. So that should help the PBB process. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. The other night, ED&F got a presentation from our Treasury Department. Rick Nickerson brought up a point that because of COVID, our in-person payments had obviously gone down, but our ACH payments, in terms of the way that we're receiving payments, skyrocketed. And there are efficiencies in that. From a cash management perspective, there were 2 things. One, we're seeing an increase in electronic payments coming in through Treasury. 2, they transferred to a lockbox arrangement, which again, from a cash management standpoint, is going to be much more efficient in that, because you don't have staff handling the mail or the payments coming in, is coming in through a bank. There are efficiencies as it relates to cost, as well as it relates to getting monies in quicker, that I think are going to pay big dividends in our Treasury Department. And this is really more of a comment, maybe to Kathleen and to Doug. I don't know if we have situations like that or inefficiencies like that in other areas across the UG that we could look at in the same way, in terms of the way that we receive monies in. The less hands that we have touching those dollars, and the more more electronically those dollars come in, obviously there are cost savings that are realized as a result of that, and we get that money in faster as well. So again, when I heard Rick say that, I was just starting to think, well, geez, are there other areas that we could, realize the same kind of efficiencies across the UG? So I just want to make sure that that's out there, because if there are, we really need to take a good look at the way that we're receiving monies in.
Great. Okay, and anything else on just kind of the general information that you're wanting to receive? It sounds like just kind of get the full financial picture early on. I'm hearing people say that one of the high priorities is to reduce deferred maintenance costs and try to figure out a way to maybe shed assets or be more proactive in terms of maintenance to reduce long-term costs. And then I'm also hearing the idea behind trying to target your resources to those higher priority goal areas through the PBB process. Other thoughts that folks are, and then looking for just general efficiencies in pre-COVID and post-COVID, I think is going to be completely different how everyone does business. So other thoughts on that? Anything you have on that, Doug, that you want to kind of share, or thoughts on the budget process?
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of thoughts here coming out tonight. I mean, the overall objective tonight was really to figure out what priorities, as I said, as we go back to departments. And I recognize commissioners don't want to make final decisions until you know where the final numbers are. What we do know is our year-over-year projections are ones that don't quite cover what our projected expenditures are. So that's the kind of priority I look at. If we had year-end revenues that were excess, that'd be great. And we could use those toward funding up infrastructure and things like that. But you have to focus those toward one-time type things, not toward the ongoing. As Kathleen pointed out, she's put in some modest inflationary increases into building our budget, and that still leaves us at a shortfall. So we can wait and hold on our priorities until my departments have finished submitting everything they have, and I'll go through and work on it and build things back. But having your input early on is what you've always asked for and what I've been able to get for many years. I think we're pretty good about that through the start of this, but that is really where we end up. I don't get the full picture on this till we're deep into the year, but it's not going to swing a whole bunch. Some of the initiatives you're talking about, I mean, PBB, we'll implement some of those things. The bigger parts of those will start to impact our budget probably in 23 and 24. They're not things you usually come out with unless there's some sudden decision of we're going to quit doing this. And then I got to have that as a non-priority type thing to take from this and say, those are things we can pull back out. I mean, some of the items you guys have mentioned, yeah, I've had direction out to my staff since last year to be looking at who all needs to be coming back into the building all the time. I mean, what are some changes? And there is a cultural change to that, because even though people have liked working from home, it's kind of a natural thing to start flowing back in. And how does that change? But there's some spaces. I mean, I'll look at the building that Community Corrections moved out into our new juvenile facility. I wanted to move completely out of that building for some time. The largest issue I have over there is probably the big courtrooms that are in place. And where do we go to? Because those are the biggest courtrooms in that system as to how they go. But that's an underutilized building that was costly to use beforehand, and now it's even more so. If we could completely move away from something like that, and that's a directive we're trying to work on to figure things like that out, as well as other space. We've been doing electronic payments. We've moved to those programs a couple of years ago. That was an initiative we started. You saw the stuff that came out some time ago. We went to the ability to start getting stuff on our phone. Those are things that Allen House was pushing hard through our system for a while. So this is some of these are some of the later ones that are coming into it. So we're trying to find those efficiencies all the time. I guess that is always the number one thing back out to my staff is where can we develop efficiencies? Where can we work through? And there can be things that come up, but there's not some magic thing that's going to pull up and we're going to all at once have a solution for a whole bunch of things. Kathleen throws out that $5 million number on our new enterprise resource system, and that number scares the heck out of me because throwing that out in advance. But I guess as Commissioner Johnson said, it's the CFO's job to be cautious about our number, and if she's giving me that number, then maybe we'll achieve double that. To get to, but that's going to be years down the road. I really just have to understand from you all when I look at it and say, early on, and I know we make other changes, but are we investing in the infrastructure? That was a top priority, or am I cutting the mill rate? If I'm cutting the mill rate, I'm not investing in infrastructure and I'm not giving employees any kind of increases. I mean, I just got to, that's where I'm going after. And I have to understand those kind of things at the top of it. And then we start breaking it down and we'll get down into a couple million. Remember, I start up here at working, how am I dealing with $400 million? And at the end, we'll be talking about how we're dealing with the last couple. And you'll have all the details by the time you hit that stuff. So I guess that's.
Can I respond to you real quick? I just want to make sure I kind of get understanding.
Sure.
Kathleen had mentioned something about a 5%, reduction that she thinks that we can use as our guide with through the PBB. Did I get that understanding correctly?
Yes.
I think she said 5. Go ahead, Kathleen.
I'm not on mute. Okay. Yeah, it is 5% across all the governmental funds, and all the governmental funds total about $300 million.
So how much? So what does that 5% equate to in terms of dollars?
15 million.
So that's kind of where I'm kind of touching base with Doug in terms of
But
wanting
it's
to
the
have
whole governmental funds, all the governmental funds, not just general funds.
Right. I understand that piece, but it still does help, you know, I think to kind of hone in on what direction we need to go. I think that, and this is just for me, and I'm not speaking for anybody else, you know, I for one say, until I know more information, I'm not going to be talking about trying to cut any more meal rates. I can tell you that right now. But again, that's a whole other conversation for the rest of the commission to weigh in on. But as for me, I think that we need to see where we are with regards to that piece right there. I think that helps at least this person kind of hone in terms of what direction I give. And then, you know, we can kind of figure out from there whether or not we are even in a position to even think about lowering a meal rate. And I know there are others who will feel differently about that, but that's just, I just wanted to kind of get that out in connection with what you were saying.
Great. Mayor Alvey?
Commissioner Bynum, I think had her hand up before
Oh,
me.
okay. Sorry. Go ahead then.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I'm going to make some statements that are kind of in the form of questions just to confirm that what I'm saying is correct. But I'll start with the fact that a week ago we had a special session with Public Works where we all saw the glaring funding gap between what's needed and what's funded. So, and I think tonight if we haven't done anything else, we've certainly all agreed that infrastructure is, you know, a critical area and that we'd like to prioritize it perhaps higher than in another area. What I got to thinking about as a result of that conversation was the valuation. And we all know that the housing market is absolutely on fire. And so we know that valuations are up. And I think we even have a notion of the percentage by how much. So folks are going to get their property valuations in a couple of weeks, and they will see what their new valuations are, and they will be higher than last year, more than likely. What it had me thinking was, obviously that results in an increase in revenue if you hold the line on the mill levy rate, but the valuation is higher, then more money is raised. And so those are the questions I had been asking with the concept in mind that we take that increase in valuation, which I will stop and reiterate is done by our county appraiser's office and not by us. And we dedicate that, whatever that increase is, everything else holds the line, and the increase in revenue that's a direct result of the increase in valuation is all dedicated to the public works and infrastructure needs that we saw last week. And tonight we are seeing that that's a really nice idea, Melissa, but you know, no, it's not going to work that way. So I guess I would still say I'm in support of, if it can't be that simple, then I'm still certainly supportive of finding ways to maintain public works and infrastructure as a high priority as we move forward.
Thank
Maybe
you.
that's all I wanted to say.
Great.
I just wanted to clarify, Commissioner Johnson, I think that in Kathleen, the 5% efficiency that's going to come through priority-based budgeting, that's based upon experience in other municipalities that have used it, the 200 or so municipalities that have already done that. This is projected, and that's not going to be realized fully until 23 or 24. It's not going to be there this year. Correct, Kathleen?
Well, yes, because it'll take a while to implement these efficiencies. So, yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I just
These other cities often go for 10% actually. So it's the 5%
well,
is pretty conservative.
Well, that's even better news.
So
And I would just echo what Commissioner Bynum said. You know, I think that when we do see a realization, we want the economic growth because it generates more revenues, which allows us to invest that in our community quality of life. I'm convinced when people see a return on their investments of their tax dollars, that drives more development, that drives more investment on their own. And I will tell, I often tell residents, well, yes, your valuations did go up. We've had plenty of the opposite. We had decades of our valuations going down, which meant you could not borrow money against your house in order to provide improvements, which created the blight, which just created that cycle of poverty. And so to come out of that, we have to realize some gains from our increase in valuation, which is determined by the market. You know, it's by statute, they have to be within 10% above or below the market value. What the market is saying, it's we can't drive those valuations. But if we do see increases in valuation across the city, that money, I would agree with Commissioner Bynum, needs to be invested to take care of the things that we put off for so long.
And so do we have good consensus just in terms of, I know it's a little bit hypothetical, but the idea of if the evaluation comes back or the valuation comes back higher and you can make up the gaps, you want to try to invest that in your highest priority, which tonight we discussed was infrastructure, whether it's neighborhoods or infrastructure for economic development or maintenance. It's kind of, that's your main area that you're looking at. Getting some head nods. Is that? Nope, I'm getting Commissioner Walters. What do you, oh, you just muted yourself.
Well, I think it's too early for us to make those kinds of decisions. I know, you know, the way I look at it, if the valuation is significantly more than the cost of living, then we should be thinking about a mill levy reduction. I know that people, it's funny when you get on this side of the table, people don't think of a tax increase quite the same way the people who talk to me think of as a tax increase. People see their taxes go up and they don't really equate it to the benefit of the county and all this just the same way we do. So if somebody's property goes up 10%, that's a 10% increase in their taxes. Or if it's 5%, and if the cost of living goes up 2%, which you know, we should take that into account. And so my starting point is if the tax revenue from property taxes exceeds the cost of living, then we need to at least think about that. And to see that as a good thing because the revenue is going up is the opposite of the way that most of my constituents think of it.
So
it's too early. It's too early to either eliminate or to say anything about where the mill levy should be. We need information.
Okay. So I think what we are hearing tonight, though, is kind of the not necessarily the priority for the assessed or the increase in the AV, or that you're not really saying that yet. It's just the direction of the group is that infrastructure and the idea of deferred maintenance and long-term costs associated with assets is something that you want to look more closely at as a way to reduce your long-term issues. And that 2022, you may not realize a lot of cost savings, but you want to get some more information to balance that budget and think through those options.
Thought we said, I'm sorry,
Go
I'll
ahead.
raise my hand. I'll raise my hand.
Oh, Commissioner Bynum.
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Commissioner Burrows and Mayor have their hands raised before me.
Yeah, I can't see any of that. I'm so sorry. I can't see that as a
So
host.
next up is Commissioner or Mayor Albee.
Okay,
Mayor.
I'll let Doug announce. How about that?
That was a mistake.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thanks.
Thank you. And you know, the most difficult part is that we're so passionate about what we care about for our community individually as leaders of this community. And it's that point of finding consensus. But the best way to find consensus is to work collectively off of the accurate data, the latest data we have in reference to the amount of revenue we have available to address these things. I mean, I want to see a strong infrastructure and a new infrastructure in our community just as much as my colleagues. However, I do know that there are other needs in the community that many of us are passionate about. And I have listened intently to the wants and the needs and the wishes of the commission. And I want nothing more than to be able to provide an avenue to do that, to partner in doing that. But I truly believe the only way to do that is to work off of accurate data. And my concern is, and Jim hit right on it, if we're going to continue to take the revenue that comes in from increased valuations and we still have no money to address anything, that earlier we heard there was 20% in our reserves and we were only supposed to be at 16, then that tells me we're 4% over on the reserves. And that's not a bad thing. However, we were so conservative in our numbers, and I'm pleased that we came in over those projections. I mean, we're not in dire straits here. We have been fortunate to have a staff that has collectively communicated and worked with the commissioners to set forth an action plan to allow us to pay down debt, to look how we're going to invest in our capital improvements and address the other issues that we have as a governing body. So I guess my comment would be patience. I have to comment how excited everyone was when we put the restrooms in our parks due to the additional dollars that we got from the federal government. I mean, you know, some communities would have just dismissed that. Hey, we got 4 new restroom facilities. We were excited about it. That tells me the goodwill that comes from those dollars that will transfer into the community are much larger than just the fiscal impact it has. It's the investment into a park system that allows our community and the members that use those parks to see us doing something and utilizing those dollars in a manner that address some of the concerns we've had collectively as a body over the years in reference to our parks. I mean, those are just some examples, but that I stand ready to assist in any way that I possibly can. I would just ask that we be patient and work off accurate data when it comes to the financial aspect that we're going to be dealing with moving forward. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to state what I had to state.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I just want to be clear. It was not just infrastructure. I wanted to make sure we were talking about blight reduction and infrastructure as the 2 items. Am I correct? Or
Yes, that's right.
infrastructure was blight reduction as well. So we had those 2 items.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you. I just have a really technical question, again, for my understanding of how we get to the numbers in the first place. Going back to the valuations that will come out are the 21 valuations, and those are the ones we will use to build the 22 budget. And do those valuations include buildings, houses, projects that existed on January 1 of this year?
Yes. There's
So,
the value of all our property on January 1.
okay, so to that, things that aren't done yet aren't included.
Correct. Anything that was, right,
Okay,
right. It's a house that was half built, it's not going to get a 50% valuation. It's going to be usually far less than that. And the same thing for a commercial building, you know, because
I just
until
think
they
that's
get
really,
complete, they're less in value.
I just think that's a really important component to the general understanding, because we did have amazing economic production in 2020 with lots of economic growth. However, interestingly enough, for the purposes of the discussion we're having, most of those items do not factor in yet to this conversation we're having about the 2022 budget.
You are right on there. Some of them, well, all of them are either under construction. Some don't even start construction yet.
Right.
That were happening through the course of the year. And the other factor that'll come in, and these will be things you'll look at in the long range type plan, but things such as our IRBs and our TIFs, you know, those were decisions that were made a few years ago. Now they're not that many years away to when they start to come back in. So when you start to tie that revenue stream to expenses, you can look at it and say, do we invest more here? Or do we want to tie that revenue stream to mill rate reduction as you move forward? But they're not, and we'll be bringing that information too, but that's more of your long range planning as you come into, as opposed to, we're not seeing a huge impact for 22 yet, but no, they're not that. 24, we start to see some stuff coming on.
So kind of focusing on the long term, when you're trying to make decisions on the 2022, I think is what I'm hearing people say, is just got to think about the long-term effects, but have the data for 2022 at hand. Other comments or thoughts? Mayor Alvey?
I think it's a good time to end.
Yeah, it's we have 2 minutes. Do you want to close for us, or?
Hey, great work, everybody. We got a lot more to do. Thank you. We'll get the data and we will move forward.
Yeah, I have to say, Mayor, we have a lot of workshops. I mean, in April and May, there's a lot of things coming in. There'll be a lot of times to come together. We have a lot of Thursday nights together coming up between now and then, so.
Right. And thank you everyone for participating tonight. You did one of the hardest things is to prioritize things that are all good and things that need to be done. So you did accomplish that tonight, and that will be helpful to the staff as you move forward. So thanks again so much, and good night.
Thank you all.
Good night, folks.
Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.